I stared at the blank page glowing on my laptop screen, the cursor blinking impatiently. Only one sentence mocked me from the void, the pathetic beginning of the essay due tomorrow. I felt something soft brush against my leg and looked down to see Sorrow, my black cat, weaving between my feet. "Not now, girl," I muttered, gently pushing her away. "I need to focus." Sorrow let out an indignant meow before slinking off to curl up on a stack of history textbooks piled precariously in the corner. As always, my gaze was drawn to the unopened letter perched on the edge of my desk, my name and address scrawled across the front in my estranged uncle's messy handwriting. Whatever he had to say, an apology was the least he owed me. But I knew that slim envelope couldn't possibly contain the "I'm sorry" I deserved. Shaking my head to clear it, I stood up abruptly. "I need a snack break," I announced to no one in particular. Sorrow merely flicked an ear in response. I grabbed my keys, shouldered my backpack, and headed out the front door of my little rented bungalow. As I walked down the creaky wooden steps, I nearly tripped over another black cat lounging on the welcome mat. "No visitors for Sorrow today," I quipped as I hopped over its inky form. The cat cracked open one golden eye and seemed to smirk at me before yawning widely, revealing sharp white teeth. Unnerved, I hurried down the overgrown path bordered by deep blue agapanthus flowers. But I'd only made it to the front gate when something dark streaked across my peripheral vision. I stumbled back as yet another black cat darted in front of me, its fur bristling against my shin before it disappeared into the undergrowth. My heart pounding, I glanced around wildly, but the garden was still and silent under the midday sun. Forcing myself to take a deep breath, I unlatched the gate and stepped out onto the empty sidewalk. By the time I reached the corner bodega, a cold sweat had broken out along my hairline. In the span of just 2 blocks, at least half a dozen black cats had crossed my path, melting out of bushes and leaping from fences only to vanish again like wisps of smoke. One had even paused directly in front of me on the sidewalk, slowly turned its head to stare at me with luminous eyes, then sauntered off between 2 parked cars as if it were daring me to follow. "Hey, you all right?" the cashier asked as I stumbled through the door, the jingling bells making me flinch. "You look like you've seen a ghost." No, I'm fine," I stammered, grabbing a few packages of cookies and chips from the nearest shelf. "Just a little spooked, I guess. Been seeing a bunch of black cats around my place lately. You ever notice anything like that?" The cashier shrugged as she rang up my junk food. "Nah, can't say I have. Though Abuelita always said black cats were a sign of bad luck, or that witches could disguise themselves as a... But who believes that stuff anymore, right?" She handed me my change with a wink. I managed a weak chuckle as I shoved the bills into my pocket. "Yeah, I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just strays looking for an easy meal. I better pick up some cat food too, in case Sorrow makes some new friends." Feeling slightly foolish for jumping at shadows, I added a tin of sardines and a bag of dry kibble to my purchase. But as I stepped back outside, I couldn't suppress a shudder at the unnatural stillness that hung over the street. Not a leaf rustled, not a bird sang. The unblinking eye of the sun stared down from a washed-out sky, and in the distance, near the narrow walking path that wound along the riverbank, a sinuous ribbon of black shapes undulated through the high grass. My breath caught in my throat. Couldn't be, not again. Before I could talk myself out of it, my feet were moving, carrying me past the neat suburban lawns and tidy flower beds. The plastic bag of groceries bounced against my hip as I neared the footpath. The black cats were waiting for me, dozens of them, more than I could count, their sleek bodies merging into a rippling shadow broken only by the eerie glow of their golden eyes. As one, they turned to stare at me. I stumbled to a halt, gravel crunching under my sneakers. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt heavy, pregnant with anticipation. Then, as if acting on some silent signal, the dark tide of felines surged towards me. I flinched, expecting claws and teeth to tear into my flesh. But the cats merely rubbed against my legs, soft fur sliding over my jeans as they wove around me in a complex dance. Almost against my will, my feet shuffled forward, guided by their supple bodies pressing against me. Their purrs rumbled in my bones as they escorted me down the dirt path through a copse of gnarled cypress trees. Spanish moss hung from the twisted branches like ragged strips of a burial shroud. I shivered, despite the muggy heat. Before long, the trees gave way to a small clearing dominated by an ancient cemetery. Crumbling headstones jutted from the overgrown grass at odd angles, names and dates long since worn away by time and the elements. In the center rose a towering mausoleum, its facade pitted and stained, the heavy iron door festooned with creeping vines. The cats fanned out around me, some taking up sentry positions atop the larger monuments, tails flicking lazily. Others flopped down on the sun-warmed slabs, eyes half-lidded but alert. They seemed perfectly at ease in this macabre place. I was so focused on my eerie escort that at first I didn't notice the small, pale hand protruding from a gap in the mausoleum doors. But a whispered plea snapped my gaze to the ancient crypt. "Help? Please help me." The voice was thin and raspy, but unmistakably that of a young girl. I inched closer, my skin prickling with goosebumps despite the blanket of humidity. Kneeling down, I peered into the musty darkness beyond the iron grate. A wan, dirt-smudged face peered back at me. Wide blue eyes, glazed with fear and exhaustion, beseeched me from a tangle of matted red hair. Bruises and scratches marred her delicate features. She couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. "How did you get in there?" I asked hoarsely, my mind reeling. "Who did this to you?" "My stepfather," the girl whispered, her voice hitching on a sob. "I ran away from him, but he found me. He always finds me. This is my punishment for trying to escape." Cold horror flooded my veins as I took in the finger-shaped marks encircling her thin wrists, the handprint bruises on her exposed arms and legs where her tattered dress had ridden up. With shaking hands, I inspected the barred door. It was locked from the outside, the massive old padlock looking impenetrable. But as I dug in my backpack for something, anything to pick the lock, I felt a small paw bat at my arm. I looked down to see one of the cats extending a paw, a thin piece of metal glinting between its toes. Wonderingly, I plucked the makeshift lockpick from its grasp. "Thank you," I murmured, not questioning this bit of feline helpfulness. Sliding the sliver of metal into the keyhole, I manipulated the tumblers with a few deft twists until the lock clicked open. Hurling the padlock aside, I wrenched the heavy door open with a squeal of rusted hinges. Reaching a hand into the fetid gloom, I helped the frail girl clamber out into the overgrown grass. She collapsed against me, trembling, her skin cold and clammy despite the sweltering heat. "Shoo, it's okay. I've got you," I soothed, stroking her matted hair. "You're safe now." But even as the words left my mouth, I felt her stiffen in my arms. A harsh, rattling breath sawed from her chest. Slowly, I looked down and screamed. The girl's eyes had rolled back in their sockets, revealing only the whites. Her face contorted in a feral snarl, her lips peeling back from suddenly sharp, elongated teeth. Long claws sprouted from her fingertips, digging into the flesh of my arms as she twisted in my grip. I tried to fling her away, but she clung to me with preternatural strength, a guttural growl vibrating from her throat. The stench of decay washed over me, choking and thick. This close, I could see that her skin had a waxy, grayish pallor, and deep gashes rent her flesh, oozing black blood. All around us, the cats yowled and hissed, their hackles raised as they paced in agitation. But they made no move to help me, their lamp-like eyes fixed on the spectacle of the girl, the thing trying to rip out my throat with its bare teeth. I scrabbled at its wiry arms, kicking and thrashing, but it was like fighting a wild animal. Dimly, I heard fabric tearing as its claws shredded my shirt, felt hot blood bloom across my skin as it raked furrows down my chest. Its fetid breath washed over my face as it lunged for my jugular. In desperation, I snatched up a jagged chunk of headstone and smashed it against the monster's temple with all my strength. The thing let out an ear-splitting screech and reared back, black ichor spurting from the wound. I hit it again and again until it crumpled to the ground in a broken heap, twitching and mewling. Gasping for breath, I scrambled backwards through the grass, putting as much distance between myself and the unnatural creature as I could. The cats watched me in eerie silence, their eyes glowing in the gathering dusk. With a shock, I realized night had nearly fallen while I'd been fighting for my life. The sun had slipped below the tree-line, plunging the cemetery into shadow. Only the crimson-stained sky provided any illumination. What the hell is going on? I panted, looking desperately at the sea of feline faces around me. What is that thing? Why did you bring me here? But the cats merely stared back, inscrutable as ever. Then, one by one, they stepped forward and began to change. Their dark forms rippled and stretched, like ink spreading across a page. Limbs elongated, fur receded, bones cracked and reshaped themselves. In the space between one blink and the next, over a dozen naked men and women stood in a loose circle around me, their skin as pale as milk in the fading light. I made a choked sound of horror and disbelief, shrinking back against a lichen-encrusted obelisk. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some sort of hallucination, a waking nightmare. But the dull throb of my wounds and the warm, sticky blood painting my skin told me otherwise. "Do not be afraid," said a tall man with long black hair and golden eyes that still held a hint of their feline shape. "We mean you no harm. In fact, we brought you here to help you." "Help me?" I echoed, my voice cracking with hysteria. "You call sicking that thing on me helping? What the hell is going on?" That creature was not of our making. A statuesque woman with olive skin and an unruly cloud of dark curls said gently. She was a restless spirit, a victim of unspeakable abuse in life, and she sought to transfer her suffering to another. We could not let that happen. The man nodded gravely. "We are the Aluka, the guardians of the threshold between life and death. It is our duty to guide lost souls to the other side and protect the living from those who would do them harm. Like your uncle." I felt the blood drain from my face at the mention of my uncle, the man who'd made my childhood a waking nightmare. "What does he have to do with any of this?" "He has everything to do with it," said a wiry youth, barely out of his teens, with white blonde hair and quicksilver eyes. "Your uncle is a necromancer, a sorcerer who enslaves the dead and bends them to his will. He's been trying to find you for years, to finish what he started when you were a child." Memories rose up like bile in my throat, phantom hands roaming my small body, the sour reek of alcohol-soaked breath, muffled sobs in the dark. I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge the images. No, that's impossible," I protested weakly. "He's a monster, but he's not. He can't be." The youth gave me a pitying look. "Search your heart, you know it to be true. Strange things have always happened around your uncle, objects moving on their own, shadows twisting into unnatural shapes, whispers in the night. He has the stink of death magic all over him." As much as I wanted to deny it, to cling to the thin veneer of normalcy I'd constructed for myself, I couldn't ignore the ring of truth in the boy's words. My uncle had always been more than just a garden variety predator. There'd been a deeper wrongness about him, something rotten and unclean. "Okay," I said finally, my voice brittle. "Say I believe you. What do you expect me to do about it? I'm just an ordinary person. I can't fight a necromancer." "Oh, but you can," the dark-haired man said with a grim smile. "In fact, you're the only one who can stop him. For you see, there's a reason we chose you, brought you into our world. You have a rare gift, an affinity for the dead that rivals your uncle's own power. With our guidance, you can learn to harness that ability and turn it against him." I barked a humorless laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. I'm no one special. I'm just a broke college student trying to get by. I can't even finish a damn essay, let alone save the world from evil sorcerers." The woman laid a cool hand on my shoulder, her touch impossibly gentle. "You are far more than you know. The fact that you were able to destroy that vengeful spirit unaided is proof of your potential. Let us teach you, and you will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." I looked around at the circle of solemn faces, at the ruined bodies of the dead girl and the scores of black cats still prowling the cemetery. In that moment, I felt the weight of destiny settle over me like a shroud. "All right," I said, squaring my shoulders. "I'll do it. I'll join your Aluka and learn to fight my uncle. On one condition: when this is all over, you help me give that poor girl a proper burial. She deserves to rest in peace." The man inclined his head. "It will be done. Welcome to the Black Cat Society, newest of our order. Tonight, your real education begins." As the moon rose over the crumbling headstones, painting the world in shades of silver and shadow, I took my place among the Aluka and embraced my fate. For better or worse, I was one of them now, a witch, a guardian, a child of the night, and I had work to do.